advocates. My name is Amy Spagnolo, and I am the director of the Academy of Peer Services. Thank you so very much for this opportunity to join you and welcome everyone to today's summit. The collaboration between Rutgers University and NYU McSilver to develop PeerTAC has been a remarkable one. In just 18 months, the teams led by Rita Cronice and Yvette Kelly have created an online hub, a multitude of products, several live training webinars, a vibrant learning collaborative, and technical assistance to agencies across the state for the implementation of peer support services across the lifespan. Next slide, please. Through partnerships with strategic and community partners, PeerTAC has promoted organizational and individual youth, family, and adult peer support services to providers across New York State, truly embodying the mission that New York State OMH had for this initiative. Next slide, please. OMH has provided critical leadership that we are very grateful for. Many thanks to the Alliance for Rights and Recovery, the Center for Practice Innovations, and the Wellness Collaborative of New York Independent Practice Association for your collaboration and support over the past year and a half. Next slide, please. PeerTAC's vision is to ensure behavioral health organizations of all types can benefit from the hope and a sense of healing that peer support workers bring to people who have experienced adversity due to mental health challenges, regardless of age, race, socioeconomic status, stigma, or other factors that can limit the success of mental health services, and also have the option to receive peer support services. Like you all, I'm passionate about the value of supervision for all members of the behavioral health workforce. Today's summit spotlights the critical importance of supervision. The featured keynote and workshop presenters all walk the walk, dedicating their effort, expertise, and lived experiences to today's topics. To the presenters, we thank you for sharing those experiences with us all. And on behalf of our entire team, I hope you enjoy your time with us today and leave with a renewed passion for effective supervision and peer support across the lifespan. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Deputy Executive Director of NYU McSilver Institute, Andy Cleek.
Thank you so much, Amy. I just want to thank Amy and the entire Rutgers team who have been phenomenal partners. And also thank Families Together on our side of on the McSilver side for being phenomenal partners to us as we have rolled out the work for family and youth peers. I'm going to apologize in advance for the noise. Literally like 4 feet on the other side of me, the city is drilling a hole in the ground. I've been told that the noise canceling of Zoom is canceling that out from all of you hearing most of it, but I'm struggling with it. So I'm just going to own that now. I'm honored to have the opportunity to welcome everybody to the Supervision Summit. I'd like to thank all our partners, and a particular thanks to Rita Cronice and Yvette Kelly for leading PeerTAC through the first 18 months and taking it from what was an idea when we started this process to a fully formed TA center that can offer support to adult, youth, and family peers and provider organizations to help achieve OMH's vision of fully integrating lifespan peer services throughout the mental health system. I want to just touch base for a second on supervision. I believe, and we have been doing TA work for a very long time, and we kind of at McSilver, and I think Rutgers shares this view, believe that supervision is the foundation of effective mental health services. With supportive supervision, staff are empowered to provide high-quality services. It improves staff wellness, and they are able to help individuals and families achieve their goals. And I want to just highlight one other thing. We have strategically included organizational leaders in this event because they have the opportunity, not only by their example, but by policy and action, to empower supervisors with the resources they need to support their staff and build a culture that welcomes and integrates a robust peer workforce throughout their organization. We have pulled together a really stellar group of not only keynotes, but presentations and workshops. It's really a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for folks to grow and learn. And we hope that folks take these next 2 days and really learn from them and bring back what they learned to their organizations. Hope everybody enjoys the summit. And I'm going to pass it back now to Rita.
Thank you so much, Andy. And I just wanted to breathe for a moment and just appreciate the amazing partnership that we've had between the Academy of Peer Services and the Families Together and the Youth and Family Peer Support Services, because we've created a technical assistance center that spans the lifespan from youth to older adults, creating peer support for everybody who wants peer support. So I'm just really appreciative of the partnership that we've created between McSilver, New York University, McSilver, and Rutgers, where we, between the two of us, we had different parts of that lifespan, but we've been able to come together and create this amazing peer support technical assistance center. I want to give a shout out to my co-director, Yvette Kelly. I'm going to go ahead and cover the housekeeping details, but you'll see her later on some very important workshops around things like documentation. And I really hope that you'll take advantage of seeing Yvette at that point. I just wanted to cover a couple of really important housekeeping details, and I'm going to do this in frequently asked questions or FAQ style, because these are the questions everybody asks. So if you're here, hopefully you'll get the answer. You'll probably want it. Others will probably want the answer later, but here it goes. Next slide, please. So here are the frequently asked questions. Will this session be recorded? Will the slides be available? Yes. Not every part of the session will be made publicly available. We'll be recording as much as we can. Some of these will be breakouts. Some of these will be sessions that we won't necessarily want to put out for public consumption, because we want to really give people a safe space and place to have rich discussions around the topics of leadership and supervision. But they will be recorded. As much as we can make publicly available after the fact, all of the slides will be available after the fact. Can we get continuing education? Yes. All of the summit keynotes, forums, and workshops are eligible for CE, continuing education credit for CPRP, LMSW, LCSW, and New York Peer Specialist certification. The keynotes are worth 1 hour of credit. The forums are worth 1.5 hours of continuing education. But here's the catch. You have to be here for the whole session, and you have to fill out an evaluation of the session afterwards. And we're really encouraging you, whether you want CE credit or not, please fill out those program evaluations, because we hope to do this again, and we'd really like your feedback on how it went this time. So, how do I ask questions? In many of the sessions, you're going to be in webinar mode, so you won't be able to see each other. You won't be able to unmute. So the chat box is the best place to ask questions. And that's true whether you're doing it in webinar mode or in one of the workshop sessions. Can you save the chat? Yes. Sometimes you go to places and you're putting in chat and you say, oh, I want the chat, and then there's no way to save it. You will be able to save the chat from each of these sessions. How can I learn more about the presenters? We're only going to give very short introductions to the presenters, but on our website, on the PeerTAC webinar page, we have all of the photos, whether it's keynote presenters or we now have all the workshop presenters. There's a little plus sign that you click and you'll get a full biography for every one of the presenters. So we hope you'll take advantage of that. And our keynotes have also taken the extra time to record a 2-minute video, just introducing who they are, and if it's before the session, letting you see what you'll be seeing if you come to the session. We're having a meet and greet lunch. So what is this regional and state representative meet and greet? We have a number of members from the Office of Advocacy and Peer Support Services who will be available over the lunch to meet in different regions. They're in different regions, or they're statewide representatives. We hope you'll come in. It's from 12:15 to 12:45, so you'll still have a short break before, and a short break after the programming resumes. But we really appreciate that our partners from OMH, and we also have partners from the Wellness Collaborative of New York Independent Practice Association. They have regional peer coordinators. We have people from the Alliance, the peer core navigators from the Alliance, some people from the collective. So the Alliance for Rights and Recovery, which used to be NIAPRS, will also have some representatives there. Please take time to drop in. Again, that's 12:15 to 12:45. There's also, what about the book associated with the summit? Well, I'm proud to say, and I usually don't like doing any kind of self-promotion, but 4 of us have been working very diligently for a number of years in the peer workforce and the supervision workforce, and we came together and created a book that's based on conference presentations from national conferences. So these people were vetted, they were accepted, and they were promoted for their expertise in peer support and supervision. We asked all of them to create a short narrative or a short article on what they presented, and then we put that all together in a book. That's what the book called What It Takes, Wisdom from Peer Support Specialists and Supervisors is all about. And we'll be giving away in a raffle 5 books per day. So we've got 10 books that we're going to give away as part of this. We're going to randomly choose, using a random number generator, randomly choose the number of the registration that you have. And if your number is drawn, you'll get a copy of the book. How to learn more about PeerTAC? We have a listserv, and we'll be promoting that widely. We'll also be doing a follow-up email with a lot of information about all the sessions that have happened during the day. So that's basically it. So how do you get into your sessions? You should have, obviously you all have at this point the program, and you see the joint session. There's a joint session for each independent keynote and each independent session. Just click those links and you'll be able to get into the next session. And with that, I'd like to introduce Liz Breyer, who is the director of the Downstate Bureau of Regional Advocacy and Peer Support Services, and she'll tell you a little bit about our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. Good morning, everyone. I know my title is a mouthful. It's very long, but my name is Liz Breyer. I work for the Office of Advocacy and Peer Support Services. I am the Downstate Director, and it is my distinct pleasure to be the person to introduce Commissioner Sullivan to you all. So since her confirmation in 2014 by the New York State Senate as Commissioner for the State Office of Mental Health, Dr. Ann Sullivan has overseen a large, multifaceted mental health system that currently serves nearly 900,000 individuals each year. The Office of Mental Health operates 24 psychiatric centers across the state and has oversight of more than 5,000 community programs, including inpatient and outpatient programs, emergency, community support, residential, and family care programs. As Commissioner, Dr. Sullivan is guiding the implementation of Governor Hochul's comprehensive $1 billion multi-year plan to transform the continuum of mental health care and drastically reduce the number of individuals with unmet mental health needs throughout the state. This plan includes transformative investments across the entire mental health continuum of care, from expanded school-based mental health services to additional psychiatric inpatient beds, thousands of new residential units, and new community-based programs that meet New Yorkers with mental health challenges where they are and provide services when they need it most. This plan will triple the number of certified community behavioral health clinics, or CCBHCs, significantly increase wraparound services for high-need individuals, and support the 988 crisis line and services throughout the state. It will also close gaps in insurance coverage for behavioral health services. Under Dr. Sullivan's leadership, New York has undergone a major expansion of community-based treatment, enabling people living with mental illnesses to live successfully in their own community. She has directed the implementation of major initiatives focused on integration, including an emphasis on prevention, wellness, and the social determinants of health in service delivery, and the integration of treatment for mental health, physical health, substance use disorders, and intellectual and developmental disabilities. During her tenure, Dr. Sullivan has worked to expand the OMH Office of Diversity and Inclusion with an expectation that program development and implementation be driven by data, with the goal of decreasing disparities in care and improving equity and inclusion. She has also supported service enhancements in the criminal justice system that divert individuals living with mental illnesses from jails and prisons to prevent their return. On a personal note, it has been such a pleasure to work with Commissioner Sullivan on all things peer. Her understanding of the values and principles of peer support, as well as her advocacy for peer support workers across the lifespan, has been invaluable to us and so appreciated. So thank you so much, Commissioner, and I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Liz. And I really do appreciate those very kind words, but you can't do all that without everybody who's listening, and so many more people across New York State, and especially with my Office of Peer Advocacy and Support Services. I mean, thank you so much, Liz. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, the whole team, because they work day in and out to make sure that peer services across New York State are embedded into everything we do, and all that billion-dollar plan to make sure that people get what they need for recovery, and how critical peers are for that. You know, sometimes I think back a little bit, because I've been in this field for a long time. And when I first began, there were no peer services. I mean, it wasn't even something, and I think it's important to remember that sometimes, how far we've come, how far all of you have come, how a combination of your advocacy, the work you do, and the organizations that are here today who want to do even more, just how critical it has been that you've been there over these years, and that now we are having a seminar like this on leadership and supervision of peers across our system of care, that we have certified peer specialists, that we have certified family and child advocates, that we are talking about how is the best way to embed peer services into our organizations, knowing that it's still a learning process, and knowing that sometimes organizations still need to understand the special work that peers do, and just how important it is that they work to their full ability of their discipline. And then the future will hold probably even more supervision being done by peers themselves, of peers. So as we move forward, we've been progressing over the years with just an incredible movement here that has really changed the lives of thousands and thousands of New Yorkers. So I can't thank all of you enough for what you're doing. I know that today is going to be a very rich discussion. While I know we are in some ways preaching to the choir here, because you wouldn't be tuning in if you weren't concerned, I think there's still so much for all of us to learn and to spread to our colleagues who maybe still are not as good at embedding peer services in the way that we know is best for everyone. We also know that getting our peer services paid for by Medicaid has been a big jump. And I always say, you know, why that's so important, because that makes things equal to everybody else. It says this is just as important, and it should be paid for by the insurers who pay for our health care. So it's critical that that has happened. And that's a huge recognition in many ways. So I think New York is leading the way in this. PeerTAC is incredibly helpful. I think we're very proud, and I'm personally very proud that OMH supports PeerTAC, that OMH helps pays for PeerTAC, so that we are here to make sure that this is done the right way. This is not happening in every state across the nation. So I can't thank you all enough or encourage you enough to be on this learning journey that we are on. Today is part of that learning journey, and it's going to continue. We also need suggestions. We also need to know how to make peer services stronger. So we need your feedback. We need you to be able to tell us what's working and what isn't, and so that we can build a system that truly embeds the peer services into what we're doing in a way that is most effective. And I think that's the critical point here. And that's why supervision is so important, and why leadership is so important. Because we always need, whether it's peer services or anything else that we do, we need best practices in the system that we have. So again, I can't thank you enough. I know you're going to have a very busy day. And I'm going to be looking forward to hearing the outcome of today and the suggestions from Liz and others as to how we can even do things better and partner even further with all of you and where we're going in terms of peer services going into the future. So I'll thank you. And I just want to also say that all those $1 billion that Governor Hochul gave to us last year, and 900 million of them are out and being spent and being utilized. Of all those services, peer services are embedded throughout. And everything new that we're putting up, and we're trying to make sure that even some of the services that have been longstanding, that peers are a critical part of what we do. So just so you know that, and we know that that means recruitment, and we know that that means lots of things for employment opportunities, but it also means getting people certified and having a supervisory structure so that people really get the very best training and best practices. And so our organizations know how to work with peers in a way that's effective. So again, thank you very much. I wish you a great conference today, and we're looking forward to the outcomes and suggestions that you may have. Have a great day. Sending it back to Liz, to Rita. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Sullivan, for your support, for your leadership, for really acknowledging the importance of peer support. We so appreciate, and all of the programs and all of the just making sure that we're taken care of as a part of this whole process. I wanted to just offer the opportunity for people to ask questions for just a few minutes, because we have a few minutes before we set up for our keynote. Before I ask for input there, I just also want to acknowledge Amanda Sake, who has been our champion for this program for so long. It was really, I think, her vision and Gina Schoen. Between Amanda and Gina, I'm not sure who came up with more of the idea about what PeerTAC could and should be, but I just feel so privileged to have worked with Amanda and with Gina, and under your leadership, Commissioner Sullivan. The work that they do is amazing. Big shout out for the Office of Advocacy and Peer Support Services. They've been amazing partners for not just PeerTAC, but for the Academy and for McSilver as well. We've all really benefited from that particular branch of your department, and I just really appreciate that. So I'm going to check the chat and see if anybody has any questions while you're still here, Commissioner Sullivan. And if not, then we'll let you go or stay. We would love if you stayed. It would be great if you can. But let me just see if there's anything in the chat that I can relay to you to ask or to answer. Yep, Amanda is amazing, absolutely.
Yes, thank you for that shout out again. And the team is terrific. I mean, they truly, truly are. And I think they're really the reason. I mean, everyone, I'm so proud of them, and they've done this work, and they've kept us on course at the Office of Mental Health to make sure we do the right thing. So they've been terrific. They've been terrific.
Yep, I had a question about where to purchase the book. We can talk about that later, but it is available on Amazon. So if you Google What It Takes, Wisdom of Peer Support Specialists and Supervisors, it'll pop up on Amazon, and you can buy it there. Kirsten asks if there are any best practice models, I'm assuming for supervision, that you might know of, Commissioner Sullivan.
I think, I think there's things coming out of Samson stuff, but I think probably that Amanda and Liz know those really, really well. So I would suggest that Amanda, Liz, that you can forward that to people so that they can read about where the best practices are, it's growing across. I know it's growing across the nation. Some of what we're doing is considered best practices. So I think, Liz, if you could just give a summary of that in the chat, or answer through an email, that would be terrific.
Will do, Commissioner, of course. And yeah, one of the answers I would have given is the National Guidelines for Peer Support Supervisors from NAPS, and that's in there. And certainly the creation of career ladders within organizations and being able to have peers as supervisors of peers, providing that in-discipline support. But I'm going to stop because this whole summit is
I think it's what it's, I agree with you. I think it's what it's about. But I think there are some as you said, there's some national guidelines coming out now. And I think it's important that we inform New Yorkers about that so that we know what's out there. And we'll probably talk about today adapting some of those, right? Probably.
I think so. Yep. There's several workshops that are related to many aspects of supervision. I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Jonathan Edwards. He has a 5-function model of supervision, which I think is going to become a best practice. It's certainly an emerging practice, and there's some research. So I'll give a shout out for his keynote this afternoon. And then I know that Cherene in her keynote this morning is going to be talking a great deal about the national landscape, as well as some of the things that she's learned along the way. So thank you for that. And I don't see any more questions in the chat. So thank you once again so much for joining us, Commissioner Sullivan, this morning. We really, really appreciate your time. Hope you can drop in and stick around or drop in at any point in time. Please feel free to be part of.
Thank you for
this whole
that, and
public-
I'll try to drop in, but unfortunately it's a bit of a crazy day, so I've got to go. I've got to get to something, a call now. But I really appreciate you inviting me to be here and to say a few words, and I know it's going to be a great day for you guys. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll make a little bit of a transition. We're going to take down the slides from this morning session, and we're going to, in a moment, have an introduction to the keynote from a very good friend, Lynn Legier. But before we do that, let me do some housekeeping details just so that everybody understands what's happening for the day. We did this earlier this morning. Somewhere we did it this morning. Hang on one second. Eileen, can you just flip back really quickly to the housekeeping details so I can go through that for people who may have just joined for the first keynote and make sure that we go through that. There we go. So thank you. Again, I'm Rita Kronice. I and Yvette Kelly are co-directors for the PeerTAC, Peer Support Services Technical Assistance Center. Welcome if you've just joined us. I know there's if you just joined us, we wanted to cover just a couple of the housekeeping details in frequently asked question format. These are questions that come up time and time again when you join a session like this. Will the session be recorded? Will the slides be available? The answer to the question is yes to both, but the recordings of the sessions may or may not be available. We're planning on posting them in 30 days, but some portions of the sessions will be breakout sessions. We want to make sure that the breakout sessions are not part of the recordings because we want people who are doing work in the breakout sessions to feel free to talk in the breakout sessions without worrying that it's going to be posted publicly. So anything that's a breakout session, we won't be posting. And anything that a presenter feels like they just don't feel that they want that out there, we'll make sure that we work with the presenters before we post the sessions. I think for the most part, almost everything should be available and in the recorded section of our website within 30 days. We're going to give ourselves 30 days to get everything together to post out there in sort of a playlist format. Can you get continuing education? Yes, the sessions are available for continuing education, and it'll be 1 hour continuing education for each keynote and 1.5 for each workshop. How do you ask questions during the session? If you're in the keynote, you'll need to use the chat. If you're in the workshops, the moderators can allow you to unmute and ask questions, but for the most part, we'd like you to use the chat throughout the session. Can you save the chat? Yes, you should be able to save the chat in every session. How do you learn more about the presenters? We're only going to give a very short introduction to the presenters, but every presenter, both the keynotes and the workshop presenters, have a photo on our website with a plus sign, and you just click on the plus sign and you'll get a full biography for every presenter in the summit. And there's also videos that are available for the keynote presenters. So all of our keynote presenters have recorded a short introduction to themselves, a short introduction to their session. You can click on that video and you can learn a little bit more in order to decide. The regional and state representative meet and greet that's coming up, that's over lunch from 12:15 to 12:45. We're going to have the Office of Advocacy and Peer Support Services from the Office of Mental Health available. There will be representatives in each of the regions, as well as a state breakout room where you can meet and greet your representatives from the Office of Mental Health. We also will have representatives from the Wellness Collaborative of New York Independent Practice Association. We'll also have representatives from Families Together. We'll also have representatives from the Alliance. So we have many of our major partner organizations will have their regional and state representatives. So you can meet them, get to know them, you'll be able to connect with them and then know their contact information. That's what the meet and greet is all about. So it starts at 12:15 and it ends at 12:45, just to give some time in the beginning and ending for people to join and leave in time to go to the sessions. There's a book called What It Takes Wisdom of Peer Support Specialists and Supervisors that's available, and we're raffling 5 copies of that book. Depending on your registration number, we'll be pulling registration numbers at random and providing a copy of the book as a raffle to people who have attended today. And then you can learn more about PeerTAC. There's information about it in the program, and there's information about it on our website, which is www.peertac.org. So let me just check the chat, see if there's anything else that I missed. CEUs will be available for the Certified Psych Rehab Associates, CPRP, for the family peer advocates, for the youth peer advocates, and for the New York Certified Peer Advocates. I do not know about CERPA. I'm sorry, I did not find out about whether the Certified Recovery Peer Advocates in Addictions, I'm not sure if they would be offering continuing education for this or not, but we do on the mental health side have peer certification available for people who attend the conference today. And the way that you get your continuing education is you will get an email following the session. For every session that you've attended fully, you'll get an email that asks you to fill out a conference evaluation. We encourage you to do that whether you're asking for continuing education or not, because we can really use the feedback from those conference evaluations. But if you want continuing education, you need to fill out that conference evaluation within 48 hours. And then 45 days later, after you submit the completed evaluation, you'll get your continuing education. Okay. And how do you save the chat? I believe there are 3 dots at the top of the screen that will allow you to do that in the chat session, or 3 dots at the bottom under More, where you can save the chat. And let's see, there's so many chats. Is there anything that I missed? Anything that I missed, John, Matthew?
There were just a couple of questions about licensed mental health counselors and licensed marriage and family therapists.
I think
and
the
whether
LMHCs, yes. I don't know about family therapists. So that would be something to probably check with your association to find out. Okay. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick off our session with our keynote. So thank you for joining our keynote presenter. The keynote presentation is called Peer Support Makes You Competitive, Doing It Well Makes You Relevant, and Making Mistakes Makes You Wiser, which basically makes me a genius. That's Cherene. I'm going to, in a moment, invite Lynn Legier, who is a very good friend of Cherene, to do the introduction. I'm going to give you just some of the rest of the housekeeping details and then invite Lynn. So I'm the moderator for this session. For technical support during this session, just put information in the chat. Your microphones will be muted and your cameras will be off to eliminate background noise and distractions, but we encourage you to use the chat box to introduce yourself and ask questions. This session is being recorded, and a link for the recording, presentation slides, and any handouts will be available 30 days after the session. If you lose internet connection or accidentally leave, please choose the link next to the title of this workshop in the program to rejoin. If you're seeking continuing education, you cannot join by phone and get continuing education. So you'll need to log in with your email address in order to get that. We'll reserve 10 minutes at the end to ask questions. You'll receive instructions by email from the Alliance for Rights and Recovery for completing that workshop evaluation. And again, we encourage you to complete it. You'll need to do that within 48 hours. So with that, I'd like to invite my good friend, Lynn Legier, to make an introduction to our keynote presenter, Cherene Caraco. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rita. Good morning, New York. How nice to be here. It's very fun to be here today as the surprise person introducing the speaker this morning, Cherene Caraco. We kept this secret from her. I've known Cherene for many years, and thanks to my work with Cherene, I now live in the beautiful South, where all the flowers are out and it was almost 80 degrees yesterday. I noted in Cherene's bio that she said she's made a lot of mistakes that have become the cornerstones of her learning expertise. As I was one of her employees for a while, I thought I might share some of those mistakes for her, but decided in the end to leave that to her to do. In all seriousness, Cherene brings to the table some much needed knowledge and experience as an agency CEO who has run a peer-run agency for nearly 20 years, bringing it from a shoestring budget to now one in the millions. This is rare in our community, as most people who really rock at peer support don't necessarily have the business skills needed to effectively supervise peer staff individually and collectively to maximize their strengths, grow in their profession, and manage the up and downs of sustained employment. Peer support workers, by and large, get minimal training overall and much less training on being a worker. Yet in our community, many people have had their work life disrupted by emotional distress, substance use, incarceration, poverty, etc., that have impacted their work histories. Effective supervision requires learning, often through trial and error, which Cherene will talk about, how to balance the needs of the person and the needs of the job with flexibility, empathy, and firmness all at the same time. I can think of no one better than Cherene to share these experiences with humor and humility. You're in for a treat. And with that, I welcome Cherene Caraco.
Lynn, first of
Cherene!
all, what a treat. This was a surprise. Lynn and I were actually texting this week, and I said to Lynn, I'm doing a keynote on Friday, and I want to share some slides that we co-created. And Lynn pretended like she had no idea what I was talking about.
What are you doing? Yeah.
So it's great. And I would expect you to do nothing less than share with other people all the mistakes that I've made as a supervisor. So you're certainly welcome to chime in as I go along. This is actually great for me. This is like, today is like old homies week. So my worlds are colliding. So I have Lynn from Boston who lives in South Carolina. I have my colleagues from the Alliance who I've been working with for years. I have peer leaders like Skip and Taina there in the audience. And leading up to this keynote, I've had colleagues from OMH who I've worked with in the past, and colleagues from providers in New York reach out to me via LinkedIn or just different things to say, oh, you're presenting on Friday. It's great to see you. So this to me is more of a celebration today of being back in New York. So thank you with that, Lynn. I really appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. As Lynn said, my name is Cherene Caraco, and my pronouns are she, her. I live in North Carolina right now, and I will tell you that I am actually a New Yorker. I moved to North Carolina 20 years ago from New York. And so for me, the I love New York is more than a bumper sticker. I truly love New York, and there's so much about it that I absolutely, positively miss. And here's one of the things that I really strongly felt like I got from all of the work that I did in New York, which ultimately was like a decade and a half of my work. My foundational work was in New York. A lot of the training that I received, a lot of the exposure I received was from New York. And so like a good New Yorker, I came down to the South thinking that I had seen everything, and particularly that I knew everything. Because you all shaped me to believe as a New Yorker that I know everything, right? I moved down here and I was wrong. So I've had a beef with New York for 20 years. I just want you to know, because I thought I'd seen it all and I was wrong. What I had never been exposed to while I was in New York was peer support. And it has become the foundation of the work that I've done over the last 20 years. As Rita said, actually, next slide, if I can get the controls, that would be great. That'd be really helpful. As Rita said, I kind of lovingly, jokingly said that I've made so many mistakes, which makes me a genius. I use the word mistakes because I don't know who's in the audience. The truth of the matter is, I have messed this up so many times. Now, of course, I blame all of you for not preparing me. It's your fault because you should have prepared me better. But regardless of whose fault it is, I've made a lot of mistakes on this path that I've been on around peer support, around running peer-run agencies. And now I get the amazing opportunity of doing this work around the country and internationally in the peer space. So what I'm hoping to do today is share with you all some of the biggest mistakes certainly that I've made, and also some of the mistakes that I see other communities, other service providers make. I do want to set the landscape though and talk a little bit about what's happening in the national arena, just so we have some context for what's going on. So to start out with though, I would like to just take a poll. I think the poll is up. I hope the poll is up. And if not, we'll do it very simply through chat. But I want to take a poll to see who we have in the room. If you could answer what your primary role is, are you a CEO? And if so, some of the things that I'm going to share are going to come from that vantage point. Are you more of an operations management? Are you a program director? Are you a supervisor? Are you one of our amazing peer support workers? Or are you in another role? So we'll take a quick landscape of who we have in the room. You should have a poll that came up. Thanks, Eileen. And I see some people putting it in the chat as well. We have several executive directors in the room. I honor all of our CEOs and all of our EDs that are in this room. It is not an easy thing to break away from the day-to-day operations of an organization to be able to make something like this. So that tells me how much you value this. So good, we have a really good sampling. Beautiful. Thank you all so much. That was really helpful to me just to get a good sense of who we have. And look at this, a lot of program directors. Beautiful. Good deal. Thank you all so much for doing that. So that just gives us a sense. This is a quote that I made many years ago now from having done this work for so long. And that is, and I truly, truly live this. I believe it to my very core. I have seen it. As a matter of fact, I would dare to say in all the years I've been doing this work, and let me tell you, it blows my mind, but it's been almost 30 years that I've been working within behavioral health systems. And all the years I've been doing this work, by and large, the most impactful role that I have experienced has been the impact of peer supporters. It truly is unmatched, it's unreplicated. And when it is done well, it is like chef's kiss. It's amazing to see the impact in people's lives. And so this is the quote: "There's a gorgeous wisdom gained by surviving and thriving. We must walk through the fire, get burned and scarred, reflect and heal. And when we offer it to the world, real change occurs." It's an amazing thing to be able to experience. Next slide, please. So today I want to make the business case. So I'm not going to come in and do the heartfelt. I'm not going to share my story with you. Those things are absolutely legit, absolutely relevant. But today, for those in the room that are really making those decisions about reflection, are we doing peer support well? Are there things that we're missing? Could we do it differently? If we're not an organization that provides peer support, why? What do we need in order to maybe consider doing it? I'm going to today make the business case. I will tell you, I have a lot of slides. I am not a slide person. I do it though, so that you can go back and reflect. And for our visual learners, if you like to see what I'm talking about in front of you, you have the slides in front of you. So I am going to be using the slide deck today, but I promise you I'm not going to be reading completely from it. When we look at the national landscape, you probably all have seen this and know this. There are so many current trends going on relative to peer support in mental health, substance use, systems that work with people that are unhoused, incarceration, diversion from incarceration, reentry spaces. We are seeing peer support everywhere in the mental health spaces, from inpatient settings and community-based services. In our substance use community, we have whole teams of harm reductionists that are doing beautiful, gorgeous work. We're seeing peer supporters in outpatient and inpatient treatment programs and residential. Obviously, one of the things that many of you do are more of health settings. So we are seeing community health clinics, CCBHCs, emergency departments, all employ peer supporters. In the criminal justice and the criminal injustice space, we are seeing the emergence of forensic peer support. And as I said, a lot of diversion and reentry work, crisis response, specialty areas within our LGBTQIA community, our HIV positive community, and people that are living their lives well with HIV, and our domestic violence survivor community. We are seeing peer supporters not only be employed, but actually leading change, as we also see the emergence of standalone peer-run organizations, which I know you have throughout New York. It was great to hear Commissioner Sullivan talk about some of the gains that you have been making in peer support in New York, certainly since I have been there. That gives me a lot of hope that other states are really looking to peer support as being valid and valued. If we look around the country, as a matter of fact, organizations are recognizing that peer support is not only valuable and it makes you relevant, but it is essential. There's so many positive impacts that peer support has when it's done well, including advancing your reputation and your relevance. It creates increasing funding and sustainability, and it puts you in a position of being able to influence policy at the national and federal level. So there are a lot of gains that organizations are recognizing by doing peer support well. If it's done well, here are just a couple of things that we get. Of course, we have outcomes, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you also internally have subject matter experts. You have people that live this every single day that are bringing into the organization the vantage point of the person walking through the door, not the vantage point of the person sitting behind the desk. I don't discount the relevance of our clinicians and our service providers and our case managers and all of those roles within the system. I will say it is not the same vantage point, it can't be, as a person that is gifting us with the opportunity to be a part of their healing and well-being and recovery journey. And for that reason alone, we have to be able to kind of flip the lens and see systems and services and communities and life experiences and struggles and opportunities through the lens of the people that we are working with, not just the lens of the people that are working in our systems and services. We have inherent credible messengers when we employ peer support well. And as an organization, I can tell you this as a CEO, our greatest changes that happen as an agency come from our community of people with lived experience that are telling us why they wouldn't show up to a program, why the environment doesn't feel conducive, what would feel more helpful, what was harmful. We recognize that it helps with the organizational culture, with engagement of our community, retention, and obviously advances recovery. So when we do this well, I cannot say enough as an organization, the advantages that we have. Obviously, at the individual outcome level, we could talk just for hours about the outcomes related to effective peer support on the person level. And you can see some of them here. Obviously, people want to talk a lot about cost reduction related to recidivism, to chronic use of really intense high dollar services, increased empowerment and hope, increased engagement, decreased self-esteem. The outcomes really do speak for themselves. I will say this, though, as a consultant around the country, one of the biggest asks that I get from health clinics, providers, CCBHCs, ACT teams, folks like that, is issues around lack of engagement or no-show, right? So if you work in a community health clinic, the death of a community health clinic are no-show rates. I'm sure people can relate. When people don't show up, and so we end up double booking and triple booking, and then you go into the waiting room and somebody is waiting for 2 to 3 hours because we have now triple booked out just in case our no-show rate is there. I promise you that if you want to impact your no-show rate, provide peer support, and do it well. People are attracted to things that are helpful, that feel affirming, that are hopeful, and that actually help us live our lives and recreate our lives. People will be attracted to that. You won't even need to do all the promotion if you're doing this well. So the outcomes are really amazing on the individual personal level, as probably many of you know. On the national level, what do we get when it's done well? Well, I can tell you the Biden administration has a unity agenda that came out in 2024, and it is a whole agenda that's focused on mental health, substance use, housing, poverty, the intersections of criminal injustice, criminal justice, and race. So, if you haven't had the opportunity to read the entire thing, please go back and do. But I highlighted a couple of things based on it that I wanted to share with you. This is actually in that unity agenda. The universal adoption, recognition, and integration of the peer mental health workforce across all elements of the healthcare system is a call to action at the national level, the national landscape, including, I think Commissioner had mentioned the national models of standards for peer support certification that came out from SAMHSA. So this is definitely a priority, and we are going to continue to see more and more support, funding, and push for the role of peer supporters in all different levels within the behavioral health system. This one came from the Office of Recovery. So SAMHSA now has an Office of Recovery. And again, this is directly from the work that they are doing that I highlighted. And recovery is enhanced by peer-delivered services. I mean, that's a period and a mic drop right there. We don't even need to go on. But it does go on to say peer services have proven to be effective as their support, outreach, engagement with networks help sustain recovery over the long term. So we're not just looking at short-term outcomes. We want long-term sustainable well-being and healing within our own communities. Peer services are critical given the significant workforce shortages in behavioral health. That's sort of a more recent spin around the country that people are putting on peer support, that we have a workforce gap, shortages, and that perhaps peer supporters could fill the workforce shortages. I have a lot to say about that we don't have time to say. This is what I would, if I got to the core, this is what I would say. The reason why peer supporters should be visible, relevant, and valid in our behavioral health is not because of workforce shortages. It is because it is effective. That's it. It's impactful. It works. And so we should be valuing and supporting that workforce because it is effective. The last one I'll show you on the national screen or the national scene is we're seeing legislation come up that is specifically designed to elevate peer supporters. As a matter of fact, this is something called the Peer Support Act, which research shows that peer support specialists significantly decrease substance use, as well as rehospitalization for folks that experience mental health challenges. Peer support specialists, however, face significant barriers entering or staying into the profession. Those are some of the barriers that I want to share with you today, because perhaps within your organization and your community, you can either remove the barriers, you can minimize the barriers, or you can be a bridge to make sure that those barriers are not the things that keep peer professionals out of the workforce or render them co-opted. I'm going to talk about that a lot, or render them ineffective because they're not actually being utilized based on their own scope of practice. So in saying all of this, you all probably have seen this. We are seeing Olmstead violations and DOJ settlements for Olmstead violations. We are seeing Medicaid funding peer support. I know you have seen that in New York. I've seen it happening in North Carolina now for many years. Medicare is looking at different ways now to fund peer supporters. We are seeing a lot of federal funding that actually require you to employ peer supporters. Obviously, with the emergence of CCBHCs, having peer support component as either contracting out to peer-run organizations or having peer supporters in your CCBHCs. What's happening in New York right now with community health clinics, community-based services, ACT teams. I mean, it truly is like a lions and tigers and bears, oh my, because peer support is everywhere. And Everyone's trying to figure it out. That is the absolute truth, because the people that have figured it out are actually the peer supporters and the history of our movement, the peer pioneers. We know how to do this stuff well, because we've been doing it for decades. It's now that we are in systems that states and organizations are being challenged to try to figure it out. And we'll talk about that too. So if we don't get it done well, and I cannot emphasize this enough, if we don't do it well, we get nothing. I know I can talk like this because I'm in a group of New Yorkers. This is a relief. Thank you for my therapy. We get nothing. We hire people with a diagnosis that are doing the same exact thing that everybody else in the workforce is doing. They're using the same language. We are doing status quo, so nothing changes. You just now hired a whole nother group of professionals that are naturally impacting the way services are delivered and experiences are understood. You get more stabilization, functioning, and maintenance as your status quo. That is not at all what we want as peer supporters or what we're thriving for. You get compliance. That's not what we're seeking at all. It's actually quite the opposite of that. And I know this one is probably relatable. You get the same service with a different name. While it's called peer support, it looks like case management to me. Well, it's called peer support. What we really have is a driver. It's not simply hiring people with diagnosis. And what we get when we don't do it well is lack of outcomes. So that one page that I showed you around outcomes, around peer support, that's with effective peer support. With ineffective peer support, you're not going to get those outcomes. And so here's what I've learned, though, is all of these trends have happened in advance of the provider, the system, and states being prepared. That's what happened to me. I was not prepared to understand what this was and how to do it well. So now all of a sudden, we're all just kind of shuffling and trying to understand how to do it well. So this is what I thought I would do today with you, is be honest and have some vulnerability and show up in humility and share some of the top 5 mistakes that I know I have made or I've seen others make. And here's what I'm hoping for you. I invite you to show up with humility, to suspend what you're currently doing and be open to possibilities. And then, somebody put in the chat, I like the Q-tip line. We say this all the time within my organization. I also want you to be open enough to Q-tip. When I say something that might sting a little bit, do some reflection about why that stings. What is it about that resonates with you, but maybe in a little bit of a hurtful way? Ultimately, we're not going to take this personally. This is information. If it feels relevant, take it and use it. If it doesn't feel relevant, that's okay too. So, we ready to dive in? Let's do this, team. Mistake number 1. We employ peer supporters without understanding or even doing our research on the history of where it even came from. Peer support has a long history, right? And I'm going to share a little bit of that history. All of a sudden, we're doing this thing called peer support without doing the historical review of where this came from, what it meant, how it evolved, and how that should be impacting us today. Somebody put a long and noble history. You got that right. But I see providers hiring peer supporters and not understanding the history. It's brand new. I also see peer supporters now being in the system without being trained on the history. Our history is being erased, and that is seriously problematic. If we don't understand where we came from, we are destined to repeat the failures or not learn from why peer support emerged in the first place. Doing it well means this, and this can be a hard thing to hear. It means that the peer workforce looks different. I should be able to come into your agency and be able to, with a degree of certainty, know that person is a peer worker, because they're not acting like a case manager or a clinician. They're not sounding like a case manager or a clinician. They're talking from we language. not them language. They're not othering people. That means that they should be acting different. They should be different in the space from every other role in the system. If that is not the case in your organization, you really need to consider whether you've co-opted peer support. Okay, we'll dig in from there. Why should it be different? Well, because the history is different. The tools of peer supporters are not clinical tools. The language is not clinical language. The worldview is a completely different worldview that they're bringing in to your organization, which also means that their skills are different, their code of ethics are different, and our competencies are different. All of these things should equate to a peer worker having a distinct role within the organization. It's a different culture. Yes, that's exactly right, as somebody put in the chat. So I'm going to do a pop quiz, okay? Everybody ready for this? You're like, first thing in the morning, Cherene, you're doing a pop quiz. Stop whining. You know we can do this. Here's the pop quiz. When do you think peer support was introduced into services? Was it A, the 1930s, Dr. Bob and Bill W. with the 12 steps? B, early 2000s, when Medicaid began paying for it? C, in the 1700s, it's as old as dirt? Or D, was it with the consumer survivor ex-patient movement in the 1940s and 1950s? Well, I'm getting everything. I've gotten everything from but B so far. Lots of D's, couple C's, a couple A's. I'm seeing C, 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 D, 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 A, 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 A. Are you ready for the drum roll? Oh, I got a maybe C. Here it is. 1795, people. We're in 2024, still trying to figure this out. 1795. This is actually a painting that came out of a psychiatric hospital in France. And if you look at the picture really quickly, this was Dr. Pinnell is the guy with the hat on the left-hand side. The person that is literally unlocking the chain, this is called Dr. Pinnell unlocking the chains in the asylum, is Jean-Baptiste Poussin. And Jean-Baptiste Poussin was a client, a patient in that hospital. And he was influential in Dr. Pinnell, who is really sort of credited with starting the moral treatment movement of unlocking the chains, because what Jean-Baptiste Poussin was saying was, as much as possible, all servants in this hospital should be chosen from the category of mental patients. They are better suited to this demanding work because they are more gentle, honest, and humane. 1700s is what we have in our history. However, I will say this. From the time of the 1700s, we saw the emergence of peer support in really informal settings, people coming together and supporting one another and talking about the harms that they experienced in services and systems. We see the emergence of the substance use recovery community. People think peer support came from the substance use movement. It actually didn't. It came from mental health. We see peer and training and advocacy organizations. And it wasn't until the late 1990s, early 2000s, that we saw peer support being embedded in clinical settings. The first state being Georgia. When that happened, a serious tension occurred and continues to occur, which is what brings us here today. How do we take something that was very organic, very natural, and actually based on civil rights movements and embed them into the same exact system that they were trying to change, right? That becomes part of our $1 million question. So the history of peer support, if you're not familiar with it, very quickly, is that it was a social justice movement. It started with human rights, disability rights, and it focused on beginning a lot of things and ending a lot of things. These are some images from that movement. What we were pushing for at that time was, number one, re-educating our provider community that people actually do recover, right? We have historically believed that the best we can hope for is stability, functioning, and maintenance. Recovery wasn't even in the landscape. The reality is, over decades of longitudinal research that we have, including all the anecdotal examples that we have, is that we recover. People that have been labeled with the most severe and persistent mental illness or serious mental illness, whatever we want to call it today, absolutely do recover. We are not the exception. We're absolutely the rule. But we are still fighting that battle for services to be redesigned toward recovery. We're fighting for human rights and humane treatment. And I have another slide that shows some of the inhumane things that we were fighting against. We're fighting for not only a seat at the table, but a voice, a really valid voice to change policy and systems. And then, of course, we're fighting for rights and for the gap to fill the gaps that are left behind in our own community. What were we fighting against? Some of the same things that we should be fighting against today. Seclusion, restraint, involuntary commitment that includes AOT, forced medications, coercion and threats, incarceration, overuse of meds, harmful language, all of these things that still prevail today in our mental health systems are the things that our historians, our pioneers in the peer movement, started coming together to try to impact change. So now, as we sit here today, these same things persist in our mental health services, and now we are employing peer workers to be in these environments, but we're not utilizing them to change these things. That is systematically problematic. This is why it's important, if you employ peer supporters, if you are a peer supporter, you need to know the history, because that history should be influencing how peer supporters are being utilized today, the impact that they have. That's why it shouldn't look the same. It shouldn't sound the same. So that was one of the lessons I've learned throughout the years. Know where we came from, because you have an embedded group of people that are change agents. Frankly, are policy-making badasses if we invest in them to do what they do well. Second mistake I've made. This is a big one. I've done this a bazillion times. Not so much recently, because I've learned after doing it now for 20 years. But one of the biggest mistakes that I see is that providers will end up viewing a peer supporter as a former client rather than a colleague. You are not hiring former clients. You have to make that transition in your brain. If you are going to truly have effective peer support, you have to be able to shift that perspective of seeing people as clients to seeing them as colleagues, advisors, consultants, and leaders, because that's who you're inviting into your organization. To do this requires a lot of humility, and it requires an examination of hierarchy, frankly. There's a power dynamic that exists within systems and within services. And in that power dynamic, being a client, a consumer, or a patient is the bottom of the rung. Just going to be honest. And now you're hiring peer workers and you're still thinking of them as clients, patients, and consumers. No, you are hiring professionals who have a wisdom and an expertise that nobody else in your environment will have. So we want to really value expert by experience as much as we value expert by education. They're two very different expertise. An expert by experience, you cannot go to enough trainings, you can't get enough formal education, you can't have enough licenses to be able to earn expert by experience. We say that we studied at State Penn, not Penn State. If you've studied at Penn State, you're not going to understand State Penn. That is just the truth of the matter. And so you want people that have studied at State Penn to be a part of your team, because the people that you're working with have also studied at State Penn. It means that we have to raise the bar, though. It requires a lot of humility that without the expertise of the peer workers, we are not going to get the outcomes that we seek. It requires us to reflect on how we have been trained as professionals, how we have been shaped to think about and refer to and consider clients, consumers, and patients, and the low bar about the expectation that they have capabilities and skills and talents and values. It really helps us to rethink equality and equity as well. You have to. if you're going to do this well. It also means that we have to understand that in addition to employing colleagues, you're employing colleagues that have access to information. They have access to the medical records, they have access to the documents, they're in the meetings, they are an equal valued role in the system. They just have a different vantage point and a different scope of practice. It means that you are using universally solid HR practices. You don't have separate practices for your peer workers. That means that we treat them, instead of doing supervision with them, we're providing them with therapy. No, these are employees, they're colleagues, they're not clients. Why are you providing them with therapy and calling it supervision? No, no, no. Why are you not raising the bar professionally from a professional development and raising the expectations? That's what all of that means in a nutshell. All right. Number 3, biggest mistake. Supervisors, organizations hire peer workers and have no idea what they should be doing. They don't know. If you don't know what a peer worker should be doing and you hire them, guess what you have them do? What everybody else does, because you default to what you know. And so here becomes the challenge. We see this all the time. How do you as an organization prepare for the authentic use of the peer role, which means power with, and not utilizing peer supporters out of their scope of practice, which looks like power over the peer worker, but also power over the relationships they have with the folks that they are providing peer support with. This becomes part of the quintessential challenge, right? So breaking it down, really, really simple. Can't get into a training around peer support. Peer, equal, mutual, shared demographic, similar life experiences. Here is a tip. If you are working in the reentry space and you're employing peer supporters that have never been in prison, you're not providing peer support. Let me say that again. If you work in the criminal justice space and you're doing diversion, you're going into prisons and jails, or you're doing reentry, and your peer supporters have never lived in prison, that is not peer support. That is allyship. It's not peer support. If your folks are voice hearers, they are living with mental health experiences, and you're employing peer supporters in the substance use recovery space, you are not providing peer support. If you are doing a harm reduction program and your peer supporters have never done harm reduction because their path to recovery was abstinence, that is not peer support. I could go on and on and on. If you're working with folks that are unhoused and your peer workers have never lived in a tent or on the streets, you're not providing peer support. So the left means it's similar life experiences, shared experiences is what makes it peer support. That's what that mutuality means. And support means what we do on the right-hand side. It's a reciprocal relationship, not a hierarchical, not paternalistic, not paternalistic. As a matter of fact, I think I have a slide here to share that. There are 4 main supports that peer supporters offer. I'm not going to go through them all. We just don't have time. But I do want to hit on this one, because this is the one that gets the most convoluted that I have seen. And as a matter of fact, I never saw this more than I did during COVID. And let me use this quick illustration. Peer supporters provide emotional support, a connection, authentic relationship, trust, earned respect, all of those sort of things, so that we are providing emotional support. What I saw happen during COVID is when all of the busy work shut down, when everything came to a grinding halt, when clinics stopped clinicking, when ACT teams, I don't know if this happened in New York, but when ACT teams stopped going out, when services stopped, so did peer support. So I want to put this in context. Peer support ended at the time when people were experiencing the most emotional distress. Collectively, we were all experiencing the most emotional distress. And what that told me was this: we are using peer supporters to do busy work, tasks. And when there is no paperwork to be filled out, and when there's no appointment to go to, and then when there is no referral to be made, the role ceased to exist when it should be the most impactful, most present role during COVID, because those relationships should have been so strong from a peer supporter with a person, a peer-to-peer relationship, that when everything else was going to hell, that person was connected to their peer supporter. When they couldn't see anybody else, they had a relationship with their peer supporter, because foundationally, peer support is based on emotional support, not the busy work. The busy work is stuff. That's stuff that gets done. But if you don't have this, you're not doing peer support. If you don't have this, you don't have anything. If you don't have this, I dare to say to you, I can get anybody in my neighborhood right now walking down the street to bring somebody to an appointment or fill out a report or to make a referral. It does not require lived experience to do that. This, however, really does require lived experience. So I'm off my soapbox, but that is one of the things that I saw. Another example of how peer support is misused, we've created several memes to illustrate this. This one says it's peer support, not peer pressure. I'm going to say that again for everybody to hear. Peer support is not peer pressure. We are not there. Your peer workers are not there to push compliance, to get somebody to do something, to pressure them into anything. That is not peer support. That is peer pressure. That is a completely different thing. So if you need to remember this, take this meme, put it on the bumper sticker. I don't care what we have to do, right? But if you are expecting your peer supporter, or you as a peer supporter are putting pressure on people to do what other folks want them to get done, the treatment team, their family members, whomever, you're providing peer pressure, not peer support. And then the last one is, I love this meme too, is the difference between support and advice is power. If you're expecting peer workers to go in and advise people, you should, you would, you could, you didn't, you won't, you can't, all of that advice. If I were you, you need to take your meds, you need to go to your appointments, you should be getting up and doing ABC. Nope, that's advice. That's not support. And when we advise people, we recreate the power dynamic and the power hierarchy that has existed within systems and services for years. And so here's what I say to my peer workers in the room: know your role. Know your role. And if you find yourself getting into a place of having power over advising people, don't forget where you came from, right? Okay, we're getting close. I know we're getting close. So in a nutshell, peer support is it's not hiring a clinician with lived experience. Another one I wish people around the country would hear. I hear this all the time from providers. Well, our clinicians have lived experience. That is awesome. I wish everybody within an organization have lived experience, but that is not peer support. It's not the same thing. The code of ethics is different. The training is different. The worldview is different. The requirements are different. Everything is different. When you are a clinician with lived experience, you're still operating as a clinician. You're not operating as a peer worker. It's not the same thing. Simply hiring somebody with a diagnosis, nope. You are hiring a qualified and competent workforce. It takes a lot more than having a diagnosis. I say to people, hiring somebody because they have a diagnosis is like telling me that I can be a surgeon because I have hands. Trust me, you don't want me to be your surgeon. It's not rehabilitation for your employees. Peer workers have gotten to the place in their own well-being that they are prepared to come in and do an amazing job. You're not hiring people so that they can have the experience of their own recovery. While working can aid in our recovery, that is not the purpose of employment. The role is also not a case manager, not a compliance officer, a monitor, a med person, a med management person. It is not focused on tasks. It's not an arm or an extension of the system. It is not a friend. You are not a sponsor, and you are not paternal or maternal. And I'm going to add to that, peer supporters are also not a mini clinician, not a driver, not a gopher, not a paraprofessional, and not a mole for the team. So I'm saying a lot of what peer support is not. I absolutely implore you to get training. If you're finding this confusing, or I'm shocking the heck out of some of you, or this is new information, or you've heard it before, but you don't know how to translate it into practice, please, please, please get some training, because it'll start making sense when you start becoming exposed and it becomes translated into practice. Okay, I'm going to go through the last two really quickly for our time. Number 4, this one might be hard to hear. We do not provide clinical supervision for peer workers. Period. We do not provide clinical supervision for peer workers. There's a research out there on polls around why peer workers leave their jobs. And I have the top 7 answers around the board. Here they are. The lack of policies and procedures that support peer practice, lack of professional development, the salary, which is actually not number 1. It's actually one of the last ones on the list, believe it or not. I'm not advocating for low salaries. I'm just telling you that is not the primary reason. Number 4 is actually the primary reason. Being devalued by colleagues in the environment is the biggest reason why peer workers leave their jobs. They're being asked to do things. Work assignments are not peer support. It's case management, it's clinical, it's driving, it's doing all of that sort of stuff. And number 6 and 7, look at this, you guys. Reporting to clinical staff and receiving clinical supervision are 2 of the biggest reasons why peer workers leave their job. Why do we not provide clinical supervision to peer workers? I'm going to talk to you from a CEO right now. Besides all of the other great reasons why, it is a risk. It's a liability issue. So think about it like this. If you are supervising a worker out of their scope of practice, so you're supervising them to think like a clinician and to operate like a clinician, they're not clinicians or clinically trained, and they go out and they do something out of their scope of practice and something happens, guess who's liable? Not only is the individual harmed, the peer supporter as a worker is harmed, the organization is harmed. This is the one role in your agency that is not clinical. You do not want your peer workers to think, act, talk, or operate like a clinician. We do not provide clinical supervision to peer supporters. We provide supervision within their scope of practice. We don't have time to go through all this, but you can go back and take a look. I did a graph or a chart of the tools that are absolutely within the scope of practice of peer supporters. If your supervisors aren't familiar with these tools, or your peer workers are not being supported to learn and utilize these tools, I implore you to please consider doing that. On the right-hand side is a short list of what peer workers should not be doing, because it is not in their scope of practice. So I have advice up there, behavior management or modification or monitoring, anything involving forced treatment, IVC, coercion, compliance, being pro-medication, being anti-medication, risk assessments, seeing themselves as the helper or a helper. All of those things are not tools for peer workers on the right-hand side. And yet, I have done this myself. So I share this from experience. All right. And the last one I want to share with you, and this I think might actually be one of the hardest ones to hear today. If we are going to employ peer supporters, our organization has to be ready. We have got to have an environment that is designed for recovery, that expects and believes in recovery, a physical environment that is designed around trauma healing in order to have effective peer support. It's a huge mistake that I see. And I put this meme together to reflect it, not to freak out every supervisor in the room or every other CEO that are my peers as well. But as a reminder that the only thing that should change in your agency when you hire peer workers is everything. I mean it, everything. If your agency doesn't skip a beat and you're employing peer supporters and you're operating the same exact way, you are not capitalizing on the wisdom and the experience and what should change in order to truly capitalize on the role of peer worker. Everything should change. from your physical environment to the language that is used, from some of the perspectives in the room, from thinking through how are we supporting people in really serious distress in a different way, to how are we engaging people. Everything changes when you do this well. It changes maybe in a scary way in the beginning, but I've done this with a lot of MCOs, hospital systems, health clinics, and behavioral health providers. I promise you, what feels like it's scary on the front end, in the end, it helps with your reduction of your workforce leaving, burnout. It increases the culture, the healthy culture of your organization when you do it well. So this is going to be some of the difficult things I want to end with. This is what I learned. I have worked in mental health systems for a really long time before starting a peer-run organization. And we get to choose what business we're in. Do we do illness for a living? And if we do illness for a living, and I'll tell you, everything around us has us pushed into doing illness for a living. If we do illness for a living, we plant, seed, water, and grow illness. But we can make a decision as our organizational changes, in organizational change, to be in the wellness business. How can we rework our entire organization and everything that we do to plant, seed, water, and grow wellness rather than illness? There's so much I can share with you individually or in training about how that switch is made and what that actually looks like and what that means. But fundamentally, we have to recognize that oftentimes what we're doing is actually working in illness systems, not in wellness. It means that we have to reframe the dominant pathology-based paradigm around mental health that we've inherited, frankly, that says these people have a chemical brain imbalance. It's biologically based brain disease. They have anosognosia, which means that they lack insight, and the best that they can hope for is stabilization, functioning, and maintenance. If we believe that, what we've been taught, our organizations will be designed for exactly this. And if I go into your agency, I promise you, I will be able to tell if you created an organization around this worldview and this belief system. This is what we inherited. So it wouldn't be surprising if a lot of agencies are still doing this or believing this. We have a lot of unlearning and unpacking to do. Here's what we say in the peer movement. Help isn't helpful if it's not help. Help isn't help if it's not helpful. And this came from one of our pioneers, Pat Deegan. And I would add to it, if we are traumatizing people in the name of treatment, not only is it unhelpful, but it's actually harmful. We have to revisit how we are running our programs and what we are doing and how we operate in the name of services. I have a personal experience with this that I'll say to you very briefly, because we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. I came into mental health systems when I was 13 years old, and I have 8 mental health diagnoses as I sit here today, because anybody that knows that you've been in services as a service recipient, you keep adding diagnosis and adding labels, and with every symptom you have, it's another example of pathology. Well, when I was 13 and I came to services and systems, I received my first of 8 diagnoses. And along with that came this prophecy of you'll always be sick, you're broken, you'll need to get on disability benefits, you'll spend the rest of your life in and out of psychiatric hospitals. Unfortunately, that is a message that happens a lot. I am not the exception. I am actually the rule. And here is the truth. I would leave my service providers, or they would leave me, and I would go home and experience sexual abuse. And what was being labeled as illness and pathology and being given a diagnostic code was the example, the visible example of a child being traumatized in their family. All of the adults in my life missed it. They missed it. They didn't see the signs. And here is one of the reasons why. If you look at the top of this graph, they were focusing so much in a pathology framework and the DSM and medical model and all of these sort of things that they weren't seeing below the surface at all of the other things that I was experiencing, that many of us that come into systems are living in poverty. experiencing racism and injustice and serious trauma and transphobia, neglect, and all of these things that when you take them together, looks like what we get labeled as mental illness. It looks like substance use. It looks like a lot of things. It is our responsibility to go beyond DSM and pathology and diagnostics to really understand what the person is experiencing. If I had a peer supporter who saw me during this time, it would have changed the trajectory of my life. I would spend the next 7 years of my life attempting suicide, being threatened with involuntary commitment. It took me many, many years, not only to heal from the trauma that I experienced, but also to heal from the services I was provided. Nobody wants to hear that, right? We do this to do no harm. I was done harm, and many people are, and that's not okay, right? Okay, so last thing I'm going to say, I promise you, I keep saying it's the last thing, but this truly is the last thing. When we look at everything in totality, well, before I say this, I do want to reference this slide. If you're going back and you're thinking, so Cherene, what does that organizational shift look like? What does a recovery-oriented agency do differently? I have a list. This is just a list of 12. It is not all exhaustive. It's not all encompassing, but it's a really good place to self-reflect and to think through, are we recovery oriented? Are we really recovery oriented? And what areas do we need to change? So as we bring it all together, this is what I'm hoping you take from this. Not that it's all lost. It's not at all. This is actually a very, very exciting time. Is to think, what might we be missing in all of this? So here on the left-hand side are examples of things that your peer supporters or that peer supporters in the workforce can and should be involved in. Everything from re-educating that people do recover, what is harmful in services, what is helpful in services, and the impact that institutional trauma has on us and how to not re-traumatize people as big institutions, as service provision, to leadership. Do you have valued roles for people with lived experience to be involved in hiring and interviewing and onboarding and training and reviewing colleagues, reviewing the staff that they're working with if they're receiving services? Do you have people with lived experience planning in your organization and evaluating your organization? Do you have programs that not just employ peer supporters, but are operated by people with lived experience, that they designed the program, they run it, and they completely staff it? Do you have people with lived experience involved in human rights, humane treatment at the tables of policy and system change, and investing in them the knowledge and the tools that they need? Do you have a team of people, an organization where people with lived experience are visible and supported to share their lived experience freely within their team, within the community, within the folks of people that they're in relationship with? Do you have that in your organization? And are you using your peer workers as internal consultants? When I don't understand something, and I don't understand from a lived experience perspective, I don't understand incarceration. I don't know what it's like to live with HIV. I don't know what it's like to live on the streets. I don't know those things. My lived experience is as a suicide attempt survivor, as a psychiatric survivor. There are some things that I just don't understand. I might understand it from an intellectual, but I don't understand it from a heart perspective. I have internal consultants all around me that I call upon and say, help me understand this. Help me understand. As a matter of fact, I'm going to shock you. I wasn't planning on saying this, but I'm going to shock you. One of the most recent conversations I had within our harm reduction team was, if people aren't going to show up for harm reduction supplies and they're not going to show up in the community to receive them, should we consider arming the dealers with harm reduction supplies? Because when all else fails, somebody's going to show up to their dealer. So what would it take to make sure that all of those safe use supplies are in the hands of their dealers? The reason why I came up with that is because I didn't come up with it. It was other people saying to me, Cherene, if I was just handed harm reduction supplies in my home, I might have overdosed, but I would have always gotten up to go see my dealer. right? So it came from my community of things that I have never considered or thought before. So if you're an organization that's employing peer supporters and you're doing it well, please share it. The world needs it. Nationally, other organizations need to know what you know and learn what you've learned. If you're employing peer supporters, but there's some things that we've said today that you're like, ooh, we're doing that, ask for some help. You have PeerTAC, you have the Alliance. I believe you have something called McPAC. Am I right on that? But you have resources in New York that can help you. You always can reach out to me as well if you want to do that. If you're not employing peer supporters but want to, really think through why. Seek consultation, training, and technical assistance on organizational readiness. This one I want to say really loudly. If you're not employing peer supporters, but you recognize the value, you think my organization is not ready yet, contract with peer-run organizations to provide peer support. There is nobody that understands peer support better than peer-run organizations. Contract with them to do the peer support component of your CCBHC or your community health clinic. I do it all the time within many systems where we employ the peer supporter, but they're co-located in another environment. We can definitely talk more about that. And the last one is join me, join Edie Schwartz, join Lori Ashcraft, because right after this, we're going to be doing a session where we can dig in just a little bit more. All right, that being said, thank you so much. I love New York. I miss you all so much.
Cherene, this has been an amazing, as the chat is giving you so much love for this, but thank you for an incredible, inspirational, informative, great presentation. So I just want to thank you and thank our sponsors, OMH and the Alliance for Recovery and Rights and Recovery, and especially a shout out to Eileen Crosby, who has been providing the tech support. We need to run off to the next session very quickly, but just a reminder to earn continuing education credits, look at the last page of your program. You'll get all the information there. To access your next session, go to the program, click the Join Now link, because there are different links for every session. So go to the program, click that link, and a recording of the session is expected within 30 days. Thank you all again for your participation in the inaugural PeerTAC Supervision Summit and Leadership Forum. We hope to see you in many more sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.